Hello, welcome everyone. So let me see the agenda. We have a couple of items on the agenda. I've kind of gotten a few from different people. I was thinking before that we can do like a quick status. I think this isn't gonna take a lot of time, and then we have maybe some discussion about the LMT tool, and on the summit talks, like how do we include some text or some slides in the existing talks, like from HP, Microsoft. Is Bhushan on the call? I don't see Bhushan. They said they would have some space as well. Okay, so status. I do not have any relevant updates right now. Satish, sorry if I put you on the spot. Like, do you wanna say anything about the LMT tool?
All right. Yes. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So last week was more of a learning session for me, where Adrian was doing all the background work of getting our tool into the OCP repo. It's still work in progress, but yeah, I think thank you, Adrian, for pushing all the buttons to get this going. Oh, we are hoping to get into a OCP repo sometime this week, so that we can start sharing the code and people can take a look and like what we are trying to do here. So that's the OCP side of things. On the output formatting. So yeah, I didn't get a chance as expected. It's a long weekend. I was out completely all 3 days. So I was hoping to go through the spec, but I did put together a draft. So I will share it by end of today for the formal review within Meta first. Make sure I'm not releasing any confidential information. I will sit down with Francesco and Adrian sometime today. As offline review, we don't need a meeting. Just go through the draft of what am I proposing as an output format. And then once it's reviewed internally, probably I can share it with the wider audience, probably the next meeting, or we can do an offline review as well. That's where things are. Do you need to go into any details or something? I can dive into it. So I did go through the spec. Sorry, I don't have any outstanding questions. Then the spec is very clear, and I'm also kind of used to the measurement series and stuff, so there's nothing like new to me. So it's just that I need to put together these two endpoints, like how do I convert my LMT tool, which is spitting some output into a series, a measurement series. That's all I'm trying to do right now.
All right. Thanks, Satish. While we're on the LMT topic, Hua, do you have any update you want to share?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I missed the first part. But I I have a binary build that can run under OVSS. It doesn't have any Google any infrastructure using all third-party tool and 100% the code I wrote. So I'm ready to share, but I don't know what I need to go through to get approval from our end. So I'm talking to our open source licensing and how we can release this binary first. Then I'll have to go through the process of open source releasing the source code. So that's what I plan to do. So that's what I'm going through.
All right. Thanks, Hua. If you need any kind of help, feel free to reach out.
Yeah.
Next up, Igor, do you have any updates on memtester?
So memtester, I'm almost done with the first prototype version. So right now I'm finishing a parser to parse memtester's output. Memtester does a lot of different tests on memory addresses. So I want to capture what kind of test failed on a particular address. And since the output of memtester is more like human readable than machine readable, there is some work that needs to be done on the parser. So I hope to have some version maybe by the next meeting, version of memtester diag.
All right, great. Go ahead then.
Just a quick question, Igor. Are you wrapping the open source version, or are you wrapping the Google 3 internal version?
I'm wrapping a distro version of memtester, because memtester comes with any operating system, basically, with Linux operating system.
Okay, so it's the same one that we have a Yocto package for, which I think is the same one in Ubuntu as well, right?
I'm not sure, to be honest, because every distro has its own version, and it's up to the maintainers of the distro regarding what version of memtester to include. Some distros may have older versions, some distros may have higher versions of memtester, but it's the same code from the same author.
Okay, one quick question. I don't think the output's changed in a very long time, to be honest, but just in case we did run into an incompatibility, how are you managing the dependency there? Are you pegging the version in your build or something?
What kind of dependencies?
Well, so you have a dependency, let's say that they change the output from version 2 to version 3.
Oh, right. So you cannot really manage this. So you either need to send a warning log saying, okay, so this version of memtester was not tested with this diag.
Okay, so you intend to do like a -v and then gracefully handle the error and say, hey, you need to install this version.
Right, not even throw an error, but rather just throw a warning saying that results are unpredictable.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Igor. Question from Karen?
Yeah, just Anil from Meta has good experience from memory tests, and he also is part of the hardware error logging OCP, and he's a standard that they're looking at for the log messages that come from those type of diagnostics. It mightn't be the first version, but it might be worthwhile syncing up with him to see if we can get a standard on the messages that come out from memtester that are similar to what that standard would be.
I think if I remember correctly, they're outputting stuff in CPER format.
Oh,
and,
did we already say that? Okay, then it's fine.
Yeah, so we had some discussion on that, but it didn't continue. However, this sounds like a good idea. So if you could like set up a channel or something with Igor, or I can send an email or something to get them in contact, like Igor or Tanya. We can deal with that offline. Vincent.
Igor, quick question. Given what you're saying, which version are you currently supporting? Just so I can check internally here the relevance.
I don't have the number right now, but it was something like 4.0.16, but I may be wrong. I can check and let you know.
Yeah, if you could let us know, that'd be helpful. Thanks.
I'll send it in the chat.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. Young, any updates you want to share for the virtual client?
Yeah, not for this week, sorry. Didn't get time to work on it this week. Hopefully I'll have update next week.
All right, thanks. So I do see some new people on the call, and I will interject like a short section with introductions here. Venkat, I think this is the first call you are in. Would you like to do a quick intro?
Hey, yeah, Venkat from Meta. I've been attending a couple of calls, but this is my first, I think, major introduction. So I'm joining the test infrastructure and automation team over here at Meta. I've been at Meta for 4 years. I've been in various roles across like storage, compute, and AI accelerator NPIs. So specifically, I'll be helping Jan with some of the AutoVal open sourcing and focusing on, I think, the OCP diag format. So that's kind of what I'm going to be working on. Thank you.
Thanks, Venkat. So to clarify that a bit, I don't know if people here know what AutoVal is or who Jan is. So AutoVal is another thing that we want to open source. I think I mentioned this a while ago. If I remember correctly, the SSD tests or diags will be kind of in this format.
That's correct.
Okay. Thanks. Next, George, you wanna do a quick intro?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm George Kargoulis. I'm from Google. I'm the new tech lead for Melton, which is our internal code name for OCP diag. So I'm just stopping by to see what you guys are talking about.
Okay, thanks very much. All right, so the agenda items. I have one question from Rajat, who I do not see on the call right now, so I will skip this one for next time. And I have a question from last time, which I kind of want to ask for opinions. Do we need a verbosity specifier on the diag outputs? Like, is there any value in not outputting absolutely everything, like all of the measurements, all of the steps, all of the, well, the steps are kind of a different thing, but measurements may be too verbose for some users. I don't know, it's an idea, so I'm asking.
The thumbs up for me. We actually have this problem now where we have a few diags that are overly verbose and have been affecting some of our storage systems.
Okay, so
Adrian,
if you, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I just jumped in. I mean, do you see this? How do you see this pair with the log leveling? It sounds like are you trying to control to filter what gets emitted independently of the log level, or can you flesh it out a bit? And it sounds like Dan is running into it, so maybe you can also give like a very clear example.
Yeah, I mean, this was just an idea floating in my head. It's not really correlated. I'll ask you about that then in a bit. It's not really correlated with the log levels. It is in my head. It's something regarding to how much outputs are you producing from the diag, and what kind of stuff would you like to skip? Maybe you're not interested in some things. I don't know, like an example which may be more clear is a diag can make determinations on the health of something, right? So you output some measurements and then you output a diagnosis message and say, okay, this piece of hardware passed or failed. And it passed or failed based on these measurements. But maybe, you know, as a user, I'm only interested in the outcome. I don't want all of the proof to save it in the logs and all of that. So I say, okay, I don't want to see any measurements. I just want to see the diagnosis. Does that make more sense?
But you mean, sorry, Satish, not to cut you off. Do you mean to do this in line with the output or as a post process?
I don't have an opinion on that. I'm kind of thinking that the diagnostic package can get a flag and say whatever filtering, like it filters its own output. But to your question, this could also be like an additional step filter, which says, okay, I'm getting all of this input and I'm just going to discard part of it.
Okay, because I'm seeing Dan's comment is basically saying, yeah, we have the language for it in the spec, but we don't have the control for it in the arguments to execution, right? Which, if I understand you correctly, Dan, and again, apologies, Satish, for keeping you waiting, but if I understand you correctly, you're saying we need a parameterization or arguments to control the verbosity, right?
Yeah, what I was talking about is a little different than what Adrian was referring to, though.
Mhm.
I confuse logging with sort of other logging, for lack of a word.
It intersects with that as well, and I want to get into that. Go ahead, Satish.
Yeah, so I encountered something similar, not at Meta, but when I was at Google. So I was doing this lot of measurements coming out of the test, which is clogging all the data pipeline, and it was redundant information. So one example is the sensors. When we are running a workload on the DUT, I'm running sensor monitoring on the background. And all the sensor monitoring is all coming out as measurements. And I don't care about things which are working as expected. I only care about the measurements which exceeded the threshold. So I was looking for a flag where I can say, hey, give me all the measurements which fail the validation. I don't care about which are within the thresholds. It'll be good if you can think of something like that, like a flag where I can flip between more logging versus the measurements which I'm interested on with the timestamp and everything.
Okay. So to your thanks, Satish. To your question, to your message here, Dan. Log levels. This idea can intersect with log levels as well. Like what I'm talking about is more of a higher level concept than just logging. Like you can also skip like other messages from the output. But you could also say like a combination of this flag or a value for this flag to say, okay, for the log artifact specifically, just get me stuff higher than this level. All right. Thanks. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one of the things we did recently, or that we're doing recently with Melton, is moving away from log info, log warning, log error entirely, and using Absol for that. One of the reasons is, like Dan said, it produces, some of these diagnostics produce a lot of logs, especially debug logs and info logs that really don't matter. And so if you pipe those to standard error using Absol logging instead of putting it in the Melton output, that can alleviate some load on whatever UI you're using to display it, or it's easier to read also in the human readable Absol log format. So something to be considered.
So to your point, George, this we kind of need to separate the logging as it is needed by another tool in the pipeline from determinations done in the diagnostic. So if you're talking about specifically about info logs or whatever that you don't really care about, those, no, let me try to rephrase this. We're kind of getting into input parameters territory with this, right? And yeah, at the end of the day, this is kind of if we make the diagnostic respect this input parameter, it's kind of in the implementation of the diagnostic to decide what to do with such a thing. But my question isn't necessarily about how do we implement this in diags, like what you're saying with Absol, but rather what kind of, or if we need some verbiage in the spec text around this. And now that I say that, I think this is not really, it's kind of in the intersection between input and output.
I see.
All right. So what I'll do, I will start the discussion on GitHub, and I'll ask for opinions there so that we have like a trace of the discussion. I just wanted to gauge like the interest in this. All right. Thanks for the opinions. Now, do we wanna go more into the discussion about the LMT tools and a collaboration model? All right. I'm gonna put Satish on the spot for this one.
Oh, okay.
So the question is, so I don't want to get too technical about this, but there are some clear architectural differences between the Python LMT tool and the Golang one that Hua has, right? And it's in the mechanics of how they work as well, not just the language. So the question I'm asking is, if we have, should we have like both of these as different tools in open source, or can we, ideally, can we make a single one that does everything, like, put everything into one place?
Go ahead, Dan, I think. Good.
I think, one of the challenges of throwing everything at the wall in like an open source project like this is when folks come in, you get too many choices to make. And I think one of the downsides of that is you get into a little bit of analysis paralysis and you move on. You know, I've said this multiple times when I'm looking like at an open source thing, if it takes me more than like 10 minutes to do the hello world, I move on and look for something else. Part of that might be a comment on me and my attention deficit disorder, but I do think it's a very real phenomenon, right? Like it's something we should be cognizant of. Regarding, you know, sort of making this decision, I think one of the best ways to do this would be to kind of look at the input parameters of A, the input or output parameters of A, and then kind of do the B comparison, then where we kind of go from there. Like at the end of the day, they're wrappers around standard utilities. So it's all about what are the inputs, what are the outputs, and what is it doing, right? I think that's what would help us make the decision here, but I definitely would like one at the end. We intend to use this tool too, by the way, Satish and Hua. We've got several folks that are interested in doing this at system tests so that we can do basically characterization at scale of over maybe 1,000 machines or something like that, versus what we do today in the lab where we put a few in a chamber and hope they're representative of the overall population, right?
Understood. Sorry, go ahead, Vincent.
Yeah, I think it's a really tough question. I'm with Dan conceptually, but I also don't want to lose track of Francesco's sort of comment about the sort of tax or overhead in getting things moving. What I wanted to say was this question ties well to the OCP certification question. Ultimately, if we're going to create a test plan for a given product, what are going to be the diags that qualify as certifying a given, you know, OCP endorsed piece of hardware. So this could be sort of we may go slower here to unify, but I think that should be the driving question, right? If there's going to be an LMT diag that runs and we had 3 flavors of them, then which one are we going to pick and why? So I'm not really giving an answer, but this is my opinion, and I agree with Dan that if we start throwing every utility that we've created in the open, then we're not going to help our certification end goal.
Sorry, Adrian, before you jump in, let me chime my opinion. So I still think that the source should be somewhere open, so both of the parties can take a look and see due diligence, like Dan was mentioning, like what is available right now, and see what is needed to meet the OCP standard and the spec and all those things. So I still think we need to have the code somewhere so that people can take a look from the public domain, so that it will get more eyes on the code and see what's needed. And number 2, yeah, as I said, I'm not sure how much what is the implementation model like that Hua has, and probably if there is a way that we can divide and conquer, like the Python-based tool can be a DUT, like a diagnostic tool, and the Hua's tool can be a test executive, invoking, like we can still be Golang, just invoking the Python-based tool in the UT. That's something which we can look at, and based on the functions and features what Hua has already.
So I was maybe gonna say something similar, but maybe it's useful if I rephrase it. In pursuing this certification suit, having the spec as a standard output right now, I think we can kind of build like higher level functions out of the blocks. So think of separating layers with different responsibilities. Like you can have a layer which only produces measurements for some specific hardware. And then you can have another layer which consumes the output from the first one, which is still OCP output, and maybe proxies some of it or all of it, but also adds diagnosis. So you have the logic to determine the health or pass criteria or something in actually a different binary or a different layer. It kind of depends on the implementation. In my mind, this makes it easier for the certification suits because we can have like the workloads thing that doesn't do anything for the certification. It only knows how to talk to the hardware. Saying that kind of goes into the hardware abstraction layer. But what I mean is like exercise and get measurements out of it. And then for the certifications, whatever goes into that certification can be like different modules that interpret those measurements in maybe different ways. It's an idea that I'm just launching. I don't have any other details on it. I think Dan was next.
Yeah, I was just going to say, agree with almost everything said here. The one thing about this that's a little unique is that we're built on top of another spec. There's the, what is it? It's the PCI SIG, and the spec is lane margining at the receiver, if I remember correctly. Like, we've got to be careful we don't deviate too far from like their intended example use case and things, right? The reason I bring it up is, we do the actual function of the margining, right? But then we're going to get all kinds of weird things that happen in response to that when, we hit the limits of the margin. Like we downtrain, we get errors, we get all the AUR things that pop up. We try to figure out which side, kicked off the retraining event. All of that data is very, very, very interesting to the signal integrity folks, right? We got to make sure we're giving them what they want to. Only comment I had. This isn't so much a pass-fail test. It's more of like a gather information about how much room you have in your design test, right?
Right. Sorry, Vincent, let me quickly address Dan's comment. So the test, the way it's currently implemented, even in the PCI SIG, it's a non-intrusive test. So you will not have any clue that this test run was running in the background when the traffic was running. So yeah, so there is no way you will be failing a test just because we moved the needles at some point.
Well, you will, though. You'll start to get errors and things on the bus when you hit your margin, though, right?
No, so not during this test. Like if the hardware is really marginal, yes, you will see errors, but not during this test, but not during the regular traffic itself. So this test is just observing the signals in a secondary bus, not in the primary one. So this while running this test, when you're moving the margin, you're not going to hit the real issues, and when the real traffic is not going to be impacted at this point. So yeah, this is more of observability signals, not for any intrusive methods.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Hello, this is Hua. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Hua.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Just add to that. That's generally true, but depends on hardware support. Certain hardware, like some CPUs, they don't have the second error sampler, so it relies on the PCI core, the controller, to detect like the same as the AER detects the errors. So in that case, you can only kind of margin one lane at a time, and if you go too far on that lane, you potentially can break the cause a retrain or break the link. So it actually, there's a lot of underlying hardware support on this feature, and different vendors does it different. So there is a risk. So our test needs to be aware and about the hardware support.
Sorry.
And
go ahead.
Yeah, and I want to ask, okay, like last time, what I understand with Francisco's tool is underlying we both use the PCI util, which is the general Linux library. So we'll build on top of that. Right now, my question is, what's the upper layer interface to the test environment infrastructure? My experience is just with our Melton. And also, I want to keep my test as a standalone executable, be able to use it in the lab, and also in manufacturing or production, or even the data center. Right. So is there any example I can look at, I can follow on the upper layer interface? And with that, we can define the specification, because I think for both of us, we build a tool to fulfill our own need, but we want to converge on a same set of features and spec, and we can improve on that. Yeah, the tool itself can be updated, tweaked.
Go ahead, Vincent. After you finish, I can quickly share something.
Okay, yeah, just two points. One is a parenthesis around the intrusiveness of the tool. I do recall we ran into an issue back then with LSPCI or its underlying utility, where on some kernels it would crash it would kernel panic if it was run in high verbosity mode. So I know this is not a desired or expected outcome, but speaking of intrusiveness, even if it's running in a non-intrusive way, there have been known cases where this could actually literally crash your production. But anyway, I don't want to linger on this because I think that got fixed in a later kernel. But it's something to be aware of, that there are some side effects to even background monitors that could cause serious damage. I wanted to get back to the question of where do we land this stuff and whether we have two LMT tools. And this is more of a process question for our working group here. Maybe we need a bit of a process for incubating diags, right? Like right now, we're kind of putting diags in GitHub and chewing on them there, but we don't necessarily have a process to sort of promote a diag as part of going back to that certification or compliance idea. Because I get your point, Satish. Like ultimately, like if we can use GitHub to just share code, that's perfectly normal and it's actually encouraged. That way we give people access. But there are some diags that we're going to want to promote to be like, hey, this is actually tagged in to be part of the test plan. So I do see an opportunity here to frame this under incubation. Yeah, Dan?
I was just going to say, I agree, but I don't know that we're there yet. Like the way I look at it is every diag we get right now fills a hole that we have. Eventually we'll get diags that are overlapping. Like you could even argue like some of the AUR diags that we have on PCI crawler slightly overlaps with this, right? Not really, but it could. At that point, then it'll be like a game of Darwinism, right? Like we'll pick the best one for the job, and then that will become the new standard. That's kind of one of the advantages of the standardized output, right? Like it should just plug into every test exec that we support. I don't know that we ever. Well, actually, I'm going to hold that because it's going to derail us. But I don't think we ever answered Wall's question either. We need to get back to that.
We do. One quick thing I want to say on your point also, and I do think we need to spend more time on the discussion around the test plan aspect for the certification, because maybe if we do think of our repo as actually just completely open to as many diags as people want to throw at it, maybe what does become more of the face of the OCP test and validation becomes sort of the test plan and the cherry picking of which of those diags end up making the suite, right? Like which ones are we going to end up running for the certification? Anyway, I think I've convinced myself we need a dedicated amount of time to discuss this this topic further. But today it sounds like we want to get it more into LMT and Hua and Satish's topics. So.
Right. So can you see my screen?
Yeah, go ahead, Satish.
All right, cool. So first of all, to address Dan's question. So Dan, in the PCI SIG, we have something called independent left-right timing, independent up-down voltage. So these are the two knobs which tells that the device supports independent margining, meaning we can margin without the impact, without creating an impact to the real traffic. So if those two flags are set to 0, then yes, what I was saying was right, meaning we will be creating impact, like we will be margining while the traffic is running. That may create some AER errors at that point.
So, yeah, Satish, I don't think that this works the way we think it does, though. Isn't this just specifying the lane that you're margining? Like if you had a by 32 card or a by 16 card and you were using all the lane, that would impact the traffic, right? It's not an independent third like training lane.
No, this is not independent training. This is an independent sampler. So
yes.
Each lane has independent sampling point as like a circuit. So you can these lanes. I mean, this device supports independent sampling, meaning you can do LMT without impacting the real.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that's one thing. And the second thing is, so we're going back to Hua. So this is the document I'm trying to put together, and this is a sample. So as you see, we are looking at three major use cases. Well, the one is the health monitoring in DC, and the health screening and manufacturing, and manual health checks. So currently we have the health monitoring in DC, like Francisco and team, they are running this tool at scale across all our servers, like AI servers, non-AI servers. And we are using like a customized JSON format, which spits out to some meta internal database. And still it's a JSON, but it's kind of customized data JSON. That's one output format we already support. The second one is the screening and manufacturing. This is pretty much a standard JSON. And this sample output, again, it's the sample execution is / something like, yeah, / PCI-LMT, and then you say like, what is the platform name? And then, yeah, that's pretty much the default argument. Everything else is optional. You can say how long you want to run the test for and what is the output format and things like that. So those are the typical output, the args. For example, output looks like it, like this is a typical, this is like a JSON output, which says what is the run ID, which is a unique ID for that particular run, timestamp and asset and all those things, and the model names and stuff. And also goes through the details of what are the capabilities of the device, like does it support independent? Yes. It supports voltage monitoring? Yes. And things like that. And for the last one is the manual health check, where people like hardware in the lab, they can run this tool, pretty much the same thing, except the output format will be CSV. In that case, this is the output that will be spitted out by the tool. And the hardware engineer can just copy this and paste it in a spreadsheet, and then they can do a CSV formatting, and then they can do some post-processing on that. So those are the three things which we are supporting. What does that answer your question?
Yes, I think, okay. Yeah, I've noticed a similarity between two rather than adjacent. So I think that the tool actually, in generally, does similar things, right? And it just underlying implementation and.
You're breaking up. I don't know if that's me or.
Yeah, the audio is kind of breaking. Well,
okay.
Well, while we get Hua back, go ahead, Dan.
I had to drop off last time. What was the final determination that we made, Satish? Were we going to add like a dash OCP output to your actual utility, or were we going to wrap it in another utility that parses it and gets it into the OCP format?
No, you will be seeing a -o OCP TV.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Adrian, do you think otherwise? I'm under the assumption that we are going to have a native. Okay.
This is okay. So this is what I was kind of hinting at last time. I don't know if you had a lot of time to look over the spec and examples, but
not yet. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can talk about that later. What I was saying is, if you, generally speaking, like in very abstract, high-level terms, if you want to wrap something, you need to have the same information density in both formats.
Right.
So you need to parse one and produce the other, and they need to be identical, or one more accommodating than the other one. In this case, the OCP output should be maximally accommodating. But in the case that the DIAG itself knows how to output stuff, then we skip over this parsing intermediate step. So this works fine.
Okay. Yeah, this is a spec. I mean, this is the draft I'm putting together. I'm planning to capture each and every artifact as a sample message, but we can review it and see if that makes sense, and then we can go for it.
Okay. Cool. Thanks for all of the discussion. I don't have anything else on the agenda, and we have like 10-ish more minutes if anyone wants to start the topic.
Sorry, is Hua back?
Yeah, sorry. I was commuting and I just got off the bus, and there's a bus coming in and out, and I get onto the internet, the bus Wi-Fi on and off. Sorry about that. So I don't know how much what I said got through, or how much I missed. So my question was, like, is your tool already following some sort of standard, like to be interpreted, the result to be grabbed by the upper layer, by the you know,
Yeah,
I don't even know what it's called.
Yeah, we do have a like customized output format required by the like DC automation tools on our side. So that's one format we are supporting right now, and the other two formats are standard JSON and standard CSV. Those are three output formats that currently we support.
Standard JSON and standard CSV. What do you mean by that? The standard, like.
Meaning, if you copy paste the JSON output in any standard JSON parser, it just says the JSON is valid. That's what I mean by standard.
Oh,
JSON.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think what you're asking is about the actual fields and data that goes into that JSON, right?
Right. Okay. Then I think one question is that so this tool, the actual main margin, needs to run on a host, right? Because it talks to the PCIe bus from the host using the PCIe utility. And then how does it integrate with the open test environment? In my case, it's still a standalone because it's written in Golang. It's a standalone binary, and then the binary spit out this my protobuf, and that protobuf is interpreted by our Melton layer and extract the DAG information, the symptoms, and all those things.
Yeah, I can answer this one for you, Hop. Like the end goal here is the way you would run with OpenTest is just like there's a Melton runner in OpenTest, there's an OCP runner in OpenTest. And then what that would basically do is it would execute your binaries in off DUT diag, and then just suck up all the JSON output that would represent the OCP format, and then that automatically maps to the Radix format. And we're going to have the same thing inside the DC as well, so that you can run it at system test or even burn it if you want to.
Okay, I see. So the general scheme is pretty much standard same. But there's no change between the version of the LMD implementation, right?
That's the idea. Like we don't specify a test exec. We let anybody use whatever test exec they want. And we specify the output to those things, and then everybody writes their wrapper one time, which should work for any diag.
Got it.
Yeah. So right now we have contest, we have OpenTest, we have OpenTap, we have Fava, and one more that I'm missing. That's what we have at the moment.
Another question is, how much is the DAG itself dependent on the DUT it tests? Like what's the difference? Where do I draw the line between a DAG and the for each DUT?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you elaborate?
Okay. So basically, when I think about the wrapper in my current implementation, okay, that wrapper on top of my binary executable that suck up all the output, that layer depends on the DUT. My tool does not. Okay, the tool does not. And that layer actually grabs a configuration, send it to the tool, and tool does use that configuration. The configuration is specific to the DUT. And the tool runs on the DUT and generate an output. The output is somewhat specific to that DUT that requires the upper layer that suck it up to interpret based on the DUT.
Yeah, when you say the DUT, you're referring to like the bus topology, the names of the buses, things like that?
No, it's just the targeting device you're testing. So basically, in the system, there's a whole bunch of PCIe device, and your test focuses on one of them. or maybe a few links, a link, or it depends on your test specification. So you don't test across all the PCIe devices in your system. So and also the different system can be different. So that's yes. Where does that fall into the scheme, like the wrapper or the configuration? That part I'm not clear about.
So I think it's sort of an implementation specific detail of where you put it. Like, we definitely agree that you need some type of input argument that says this is the lane or this is the bus that I want you to test, right? And then I think because we're using LSPCI, like that's somewhat dictating the way that we name the bus and things like that, I would think too. Is that the way you're thinking?
If I may
yes.
jump,
is that to be standardized? That part is specifying what to test, and based on what you specify, how to interpret the result. Is that part of this standardization that all user, like all the tools underlying executable, needs to follow that specification?
Yeah.
So that user, no matter which tool you use, user face the same interface.
Yeah, I think it has to be, or it's not a diag. Then it's more of an information utility, would be my opinion. But I'd be curious what others think.
So can I jump in, Satish, for a second? So you're asking about interpretation. In the spec, we actually specify that the diag is the one to interpret the measurements and provide the diagnosis. So there is a diagnosis message in the output as well. Everything that's on top of the diags is just executing. It does not interpret data.
I think Hua's question is slightly different. Maybe let me try my understanding here.
Is the wrapper part of the diag? Like, no.
No.
Okay.
So yeah, well, I think I kind of get what you're saying. It's like we are standardizing the output, but are we standardizing the input as well? Like the input to this tool is, for example, in my case, is a configuration file, which has a bunch of BDFs and which has a bunch of lane numbers for each BDF. If I don't want to merge in all the lanes, if I want to merge in subset of lanes, then I need to say what lanes I need to merge in on each BDF. And also I need to say, what is the receiver number? Because the LMT needs a receiver number as a parameter. Or am I going to margin at the transmitter side or on the receiver side? Even though they call it as a receiver number, receiver ID, RX1, RX2. So all those things are part of the config file. And currently we do have our own internal, like Google's protobuf, we have our own internal thrift. So we are providing the information as a thrift file to the tool. But when we go towards OCP, then we need to think about how do I standardize this as an input as well. So I think that's what Hua is trying to see. Like, are we trying to standardize that one as well? It looks like we are. I mean, that's my understanding.
Go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to say, I think we are, but I would say that, if you had a standard that said you put your file name here, like that is the level of standardization that I'm thinking about that we try to do. Like, you pretty much have a way of pass key vals to the diag, whatever those key vals are. Like, we don't standardize in any way. Like, that has to be standardized per diag, right?
Right. Sorry, Vince, one more thing. Yeah, we have an option of providing the config file as a flat file, meaning somewhere in the disk, or we also have the ability to bundle it along with the binary so that you can just say, hey, platform name is Intel or AMD underscore something. Then we go ahead and check if the binary has the config file. We just use it. If not, we will find it if it is in the /temp directory, whatever the user provides.
So Satish, there is a thing called input parameters right now in the output spec, which is kind of what Dan just said. It's like a flat dictionary and you put random stuff in it. It is currently unspecified, and that is on purpose because we do not have a good specification for it. But we also have had some discussion on making a different spec because this is the output spec that we have right now.
Exactly.
A different spec for inputs for the diags. That didn't progress so far, but we will get back to that as well.
Sounds good. Vincent?
Yeah, I think one thing I wanted to say on this is, I don't know how familiar you are with the output spec, but you know, there are to capturing the hardware info, there are sections in the output spec that will give you the DUT info, the software info, the hardware info. So I think your question is spot on the portability of the diagnostic. You know, can you take this diag and run it across, you know, a dozen flavor of hardware topologies? And that is definitely the intent. But how the test and the diagnostic behaves on each platform is obviously going to be variable based on that input config. But the output will tell you what the hardware details were. And that is actually one of the benefit of the diag output, is that you get to know as part of that output what it ran on. So I wanted to make sure that you are familiar with those fields, because the spec itself doesn't have a ton of fields, but those are the few that describe the target environment. I don't know if you're still with us and got that, but
yes, I heard all that. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, based on my experience, integrating my tool with our Melton layer, I can see like there are buckets where I can upload information, and I just need to know where the bucket is, you know, what bucket for certain detailed information. But then if we actually want to dig into those buckets currently are pretty generic. Okay, you have the hardware info, you have described system, but for say, for example, the failure symptom, if the test needs to interpret specifically for lane margining, then we would go into like the balancing of like how much the upper layer, the caller, is aware of what its test does and how like specific test can provide. So the area is hard to draw a line. I don't know if I think it's okay, because I have my limited experience understanding of the whole system. Maybe I can give a demo maybe internally first to see how it runs in our current production, and then you can give me feedback how that fit into this whole OCP scheme.
I think you can. You know, the topic you're bringing up, we literally discussed for months, you know, about sort of where do you do the determination, where do you put the limit, where do you put the evaluation, and all those other things. So yeah, we're happy to kind of like at least, you know, explain the rationale of why we came up with what we did after discussing it, you know, amongst all the different parties.
So we are on time. I was gonna say a similar thing. Maybe next time we can have like a demo from both of the tools, and then we can make like further decisions, like how to integrate or all of that.
Sounds good. Maybe one more other topic. I know Karen and others are working on some of the NVMe and SSD diagnostics. We're also working with some of our vendors to develop some other storage diagnostics that are a little bit more generic, like basically wrappers around smart CTL and things like that. I didn't know if there was interest in open sourcing those as well, but sort of to that topic we were discussing about, do we just throw every diag we can and then start picking the good ones? Maybe we include those in the OCP stuff as well, but we can talk about it next week.
Cool.
Cool.
I'll
Thanks.
add.
Thank you.
Thanks. See you next week.